Hello and good evening. You're watching Movement News, and my name is Sandra Lopez. Movement News is Chicago's newest grassroots media organization committed to the presentation of local Chicagoland news, updates, and narratives. We aim to feature stories that represent you and your local community. Thank you for watching, and welcome to the movement. All right, so we're going to jump right into local news and updates. On Thursday, Illinois administrators voted to raise in-state tuition costs for incoming freshmen. The tuition hike was approved during a Board of Trustees meeting, making it the first tuition hike for the Illinois university system since 2014. This hike means that freshmen will pay 1.8% more to attend Urbana-Champaign. Will pay 1.8% more to attend Urbana-Champaign and Chicago campuses, 1% more to attend Springfield campuses, and a 3.65% increase for room and board. It was also during this meeting that a modest 19% salary raise and contract extension were awarded to President Tom Killeen, who will earn approximately $835,000 a year. He said the rising tuition costs will help support a family hiring initiative that was started earlier this year. Luckily, there is a silver lining to this story. On Friday afternoon, a day after the announcement, Governor J.B. Pritzker announced a deal to expand its free tuition program with the University of Illinois Board of Trustees. At an unrelated bill standing in Chicago, Pritzker said that he personally asked the board to expand its free tuition program for low-income families in light of the hike. And I quote, "I asked them to lift the income threshold for the Illinois Commitment Program by an additional 10%, and they will institute this for the coming school year," Pritzker said. That means now that more than half of the households in the state will qualify for free tuition. The program provides scholarships and grants to cover tuition and campus fees for students who are Illinois residents and have a family income of up to $61,000. But now that number will go up to family incomes up to $67,000. It will really affect a lot of families, so that's great news. Now up in national news. After much delay, Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi transmitted the articles of impeachment to the Senate. The two articles, including charging the president with abuse of power and obstruction of Congress, were signed by Pelosi and hand-delivered to the Senate chamber on a historic ceremony on Wednesday night. Pelosi's delay in formally presenting impeachment to the Senate raised a lot of eyebrows, but ultimately achieved significant gains. The articles of impeachment were withheld by the House in a bid to increase Democratic leverage in Senate negotiations and also to allow for more evidence to come to light. One of the most critical gains comes from the former National Security Advisor John Bolton's public declaration to testify in the Trump impeachment trial. The impeachment trial began this afternoon in earnest at 1 p.m. Now we're going to head over to elections 2020. The Iowa State Caucus is only 14 days away, and 4 early state polls suggest a very unique look at how the 2020 Democratic primary will pan out. It's looking pretty tight for Iowa, but especially New Hampshire, which has less than 10 points separating Biden and Sanders, with Buttigieg and Warren trailing not too far behind. The poll suggests a tie between Biden and Sanders in Iowa. However, considering and I kid you not, the lack of polling data and survey research, there is a suggestion that these polls may no longer reflect the current state of the race. A recent poll by Monmouth University emphasized the importance of voters' ideological leanings, as many caucus goers will end up backing their second choice candidates, not their first, in a process known as a realignment process. Essentially, the realignment process is if a candidate does not have enough support, usually at least 15% of voters at a caucus site, their supporters are asked to align themselves with another candidate, and that is typically their second choice. And of course, ideological leanings include conservative, moderate, liberal, etc. And so this is pretty interesting because it makes it increasingly competitive for Sanders and Warren, who share a heavy overlap when it comes to support. It should come to no surprise then that the unfolding of last week's Warren v. Sanders drama. After all, only one candidate can be nominated, and we are less than 3 weeks away from the Iowa caucus. Warren's strategy has got the whole town talking, with think pieces, body language experts, and pushy CNN moderators capitalizing on the war between the progressive candidates. Where do we stand? Well, we believe in keeping your eyes on the most pressing issues that affect us and our community. Unlike other media outlets who are owned by big moneyed interest, we know our audience will see through the smoke and the mirrors. And remember, we do elect those in office who have the power to affect our lives, whether it be healthcare, women's reproductive rights, immigration, or climate change. It's important that we continue to stay focused and continue paying attention. Yesterday, we celebrated the life and work of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who inspired a generation and contributed to the American Civil Rights Movement in the 1960s. King fought for liberation and self-determination of the Black community, as well as economic justice for all poor Americans. On April 4th, 1968, King was killed by a white supremacist group in Memphis, Tennessee. King's life and work transformed our nation, but there is no doubt that in 2020, racism still persists, and communities of color are under threat of injustice and physical violence. Take, for example, Georgia this past Friday. Three young white men were arrested as they were deemed likely to commit acts of terror against Black and Jewish communities on the MLK holiday. The men are members of the white supremacist group The Base, which, according to authorities, seeks to overthrow the U.S. government, launch a race war, and create a white ethno-state. They are also known to do regular shooting drills with members. The men arrested, Luke Austin Lane, Michael John Helter-Brandt, and Jacob Kaderli, were charged with conspiracy to commit murder and being members of a criminal gang. Now we're going to go ahead and move over to our hot topic. Our hot topic today is the phenomena of the U.S. veterans who get deported. In the last few years, deported veterans such as Hector Barajas and Miguel Perez Jr. have made headlines with their cases being brought to the public eye. There is no official number of how many veterans have been deported, but activists estimate that they are in the thousands, and most are actually citizens from Mexico and Latin America. On Veterans Day of 2019, Senator Tammy Duckworth traveled to Tijuana to what is known as a Veteran Support House, a community center that specializes in aiding veterans recently deported who usually suffer addiction and homelessness. Duckworth has introduced a bill in the Senate that would end the deportations of veterans. With us today is veteran and activist Carlos Luna, who has spent the last several years advocating for veterans who face deportation. Hi, Carlos. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So can you explain to us a little bit about what exactly is a green card veteran?
So a green card veteran refers to a person who served in the U.S. military without having had American citizenship. So our military has a very long history of utilizing non-American born people to fight its battles. We have evidence of Mexican soldiers fighting as far back as the Revolutionary War, and it's something that has continued throughout our history.
And what causes a green card veteran to be detained and eventually deported?
Well, excuse me. The circumstance that takes a veteran from their family through deportation really is a product of our criminal justice system. From our experience and from meeting a lot of these veterans, we have found that many of them were suffering from lack of access to a lot of resources that they might have needed. And these go from anywhere from medical attention, mental health, substance use and abuse, to as much as any type of programs that would have helped them into upward mobility, whether it's access to schools, access to jobs that would allow for them to provide for their family. And we found that for many of these men and women, they they engage in behaviors that are not unlike the veterans that did have citizenship. The only difference is when these veterans fall through the systemic gaps that we've already documented and have evidence for, they don't have that safety net that many of the other or their citizen counterparts do, which is being back home to their community. So in a nutshell, that's essentially how they end up in deportation proceedings.
I see. And what happens when a veteran is deported? What kind of conditions do they experience after deportation?
Right. Well, they are not treated differently for the most part than non-citizen people who are facing deportation. As we can see from news, especially over the last few years, they are suffering from inhumane conditions. We had a veteran that was deported last November who is he's a witness in a federal lawsuit against GEO Group and ICE. And with that being the case, ICE still made sure that he was deported to El Salvador.
Wow. Wow. And that happened when?
That happened in November.
Oh, that was really recent. Wow.
Correct.
And this is the Green Card Veterans, is an organization that helps support those. Can you tell me a little bit more about this organization?
I'll be happy to. So Green Card Veterans is a council of LULAC, a Chicago-based council of LULAC, LULAC being the League of United Latin American Citizens. It is the nation's oldest and largest Latino civil rights organization in the country. They have a history of providing good legal battles that have opened the doors for many people to come. So, for instance, the famous Supreme Court decision, Brown versus Board of Education, was actually decided because of a LULAC win in California years before. So they have a platform that allows for us to advocate for these men and women because there are women at the highest levels.
Nice. Great. And I mean, it's incredible what happened recently with Senator Duckworth. Are there any other bills in Congress that could bring these veterans home?
Right. So Senator Duckworth has actually introduced 3 bills to help alleviate the deportation, and each bill does something separate in an attempt to remedy this phenomenon. Other congressmen, such as Congressman Tacano from California, Congressman Vicente Gonzalez of Texas, they have all introduced different legislative proposals. Unfortunately, they have not gained the traction that they need in the House or the Senate to make it to vote. So while it is a phenomenon that is contrary to everything that we believe in the U.S., at least what we're told, it's something that unfortunately has not gained the attention that it deserves in neither House or the Senate. So we're definitely thankful to have a champion like our own Senator Duckworth leading the battle in this.
Right. Do you feel that there's been an uptick since our current administration has come into office, maybe with the deportation of veterans?
So the GAO, the Government Accountability Office, came out with a report. They published a report June of last year in which they indicated that, one, there is no good record keeping in this, so we don't really have an idea of how many veterans are actually put into deportation proceedings and then removed. Also, they demonstrate how since October of 2017, things have actually gotten worse or more difficult for immigrant service members. So we were at a congressional hearing on this topic. We were invited there also in November, and A witness testified that since the Trump administration has been in power, it is more difficult for a non-service member immigrant to be naturalized than it is for somebody in the service. We came up with a instance here from one of our suburbs where this active duty Marine stationed in Japan was not being naturalized because he couldn't make it back from Japan to take his fingerprints, which is ridiculous because obviously they already have the fingerprints and everything else. So there is definitely a lot more accountability that's needed within the system so that we can address the inhumane conditions that these veterans and the other people in there are actually going through.
Absolutely. And what is your group doing directly to support or to kind of stop the deportations of these veterans?
Right. So over the last 3 years, we've evolved into when we became exposed to this problem, we only knew of one veteran here in Chicago that was facing this, and we set out to try to stop his deportation. Throughout these years, we became aware of the problem at a larger scale. Some of our allies have been able to identify more than 350 veterans to over 40 different countries. So one thing that we realized is that in order for the immigration attorney to be able to help bring that person back, repatriate them, or at least get them a adjustment of status to bring them back, there has to be an attorney who can help with the post-conviction relief. So one of our efforts this year will be to try to raise money so that we can try to help the veterans by helping them with legal services that are unfortunately very specialized and very expensive.
Absolutely. And so it sounds like maybe there's something our audience can do, or, is there something that we can do to help
Yes, thank
the organization?
Well, I would say that one of the biggest things that has contributed to some of the success that we've had over the last few years is by people raising awareness. Excuse me. So we are on social media. You can find us at Green Card Vets on all of your favorite social media platforms, or visit our website, greencardvets.org, and follow our progress in this battle and share with your networks. And hopefully we can see you at one of our fundraisers or events.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Carlos. I knew I threw a little bit of some curveball questions there. But thank you so much for joining us today. As Carlos mentioned, to learn more and to find out how you can help, you can visit them online at Green Card Veterans. And we will...
Green Card Vets.
Green Card Vets. Sorry about that. We will keep you guys posted. So thank you so much, Carlos, for joining us. Thank you. All right, so to learn more about this important issue, you can watch the new documentary, Ready for War, which follows the stories of 3 U.S. soldiers after deportation to Mexico. It is available on Hulu and Showtime. And now, time for our local plug. So our local plug for today is an evening dialogue with Centoya Brown Long. On Thursday, January 30th, Centoya Brown Long will be in dialogue with Dr. Tara Betts, the literary editor of New City, as they discuss her new book, Free Centoya, My Search for Redemption in the American Prison System. They will also reflect on the impact of trafficking in Black communities in recognition of January as Human Trafficking Awareness Month. This event will be taking place at the Mandel Hall, located on 1131 East 57th Street on January 30th from 6 to 8 p.m. And that's all the time we have for tonight. All of the issues that we discussed on this episode are directly related to voter participation. The laws that affect our lives are written by those that we elect to serve in office. Remember that each year, 4 million young people turn 18, and that's a voting bloc with the potential to decide elections. You can register to vote by visiting www.ova.elections.il.gov. And for more information about these stories and for more great content, follow us on social media at Mass Movement Media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, as well as YouTube. And that's all the time we have for tonight. Today we leave you with a clip and speech by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Thank you and good night.
I know you're asking today, how long will it take? Somebody's asking, how long will prejudice blind the visions of men? I come to say to you this afternoon, however difficult the moment, yes, sir, however frustrating the hour, it will not be long, because truth crushed earth will rise again. Yes, sir. How long? Not long. Yes, sir. Because no lie can live forever. Yes, sir. How long? Not long. How long? Because you shall reap what you sow. Yes, sir. How long? Not long. How long? Truth forever on the scaffold, wrong forever on the throne. Yes, that scaffold sways the future. Behind the dim unknown standeth God within the shadow, keeping watch above his own. How long? Not long. Because the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. How long? Not long. Because mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. He's trampling out the village where the grapes of wrath are stored. He's loosed the fateful lightning of his terrible swift sword. His truth is marching on. He has sounded forth the trumpet that shall never call retreat. He is sifting out the hearts of men before his judgment seat. Oh, be swift, my soul, stand for him. Be jubilant, my feet. Our God is marching on. Glory, hallelujah. Glory, hallelujah.